got a part in a film being shot in Ireland called Run and Jump, in which I played a character who dies suddenly. I stayed in the Wilton Hotel in Bray the night before the shoot and was brought to the set near Roundwood at 6:40 in a big black Mercedes. I got costumed in a black suit and tie, and the makeup department transformed me hands into white marble claws and my face into the pallid, lifeless mask of the dead. I walked from there to the house where the shooting was to take place and felt a chill as the crew looked on. "Dead man walking," a member of the crew cried out as a joke, but nobody laughed. It was an ordinary modern house in its own grounds, big and cosy with timber floors in the hallway, soft sofas in the study and a stove fire in the drawing room. Lots of mourners were standing around with tea and eating sandwiches, and a dark oak coffin was situated on a plinth in the front room. It was a normal wake, except that the corpse was not yet in the coffin, and everyone was looking at me.
Okay, Michael, so here we are, staring at lakes.
Here we are, Anya, sitting on the bench staring at the lake.
Yeah, Michael, I was talking to you a year ago, my first interview on Cavan TV in March last year.
Yeah.
Boy, you've had some years since.
Yeah, I've had a lucky year.
Lucky?
You know, yeah.
A good year.
I was very lucky. The book kind of interviews happened right. Did a lovely interview with you, and then other people like whoever, Brendan O'Connor and a few of them on the television.
Yeah.
And that helps, you know, that helps people read the book. And people really seem to like the book. It seemed to help people with depression, and people, you know, a lot of people would say, yeah, I was in that position.
You kind of came out about the depression a bit, didn't you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's any big deal. It's like, since I wrote a book, Staring at Lakes, the amount of people who come to me and say, I feel the same way. I think everybody feels down. Everybody gets depressed. There's nobody that is up all the time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And you wrote about it so plainly in the book, like where you took to the bed and you couldn't get out of the bed.
Yeah. But I think, like, I wrote about, I don't know why the book went so well, but it did, and I'm absolutely delighted. And now I'm back in Cavan, sitting at Killikeen, staring at the lake.
You've won 3 awards. You won the Bord Gash Award.
Yeah, there was the John Murray award, and then there was the best non-fiction, and then there was the overall winner. And they were announced in Dublin at a big dinner party, and it was great fun. I was there.
All dressed up?
All dressed up, the old Dickie Poe, and yeah, I won the 3 of them, so I was very happy with that.
Why do you think your book is such a success? And it does strike a chord with a lot of people, and from people I was talking about, they couldn't put it down until they had it finished.
Well, I think that it seems to have fit, or have hit, it hit some sort of mood in the country. And I think it's to do with the fact that we've grown up in the past 20 years. We've, in some sense, left the kind of religious behaviour, the way we used to behave religiously, we've left it behind, because there's bits of it where we can't be naive anymore. There's bits of it that don't work so well. There's bits of it that are exclusive to women, all the rest of it. And so people are lonely, people are full of anxiety, you know, because God gives you reassurance. Your mammy gives you reassurance. Being with your family gives you reassurance. It's nice to feel loved, it's nice to feel cherished. And if people feel they're kind of alone in the world, it can be very depressing. And I think that's how people feel at the moment. Everybody is struggling in their own house, and they're paying mortgages, and they're losing money, and they're working hard, and they're paying tax, and maybe they've no job, you know. But they've nothing to fall back on now. Like,
why? Because of this
well,
God?
Well, not because of God, but because society has changed, and we just don't rely as much, maybe as we used to, on faith, and maybe we don't rely as much as we used to on family. Do you know, that people feel isolated, you know, and alone. And I think that an awful lot of people feel that, and I think that's why the book Staring at Lakes did so well, because it connected. I mean, I couldn't believe the way it connected. You know, I would have done small audiences when I'd go around touring a one-man show for years. But after the book came out, I was playing in places like the Pavilion in Dublin, you know, to full houses of 350 people. And I was just amazed how well the book went down, yeah. So all I can say is I think it hit a mood that the country was, people were feeling alone and feeling down and exhausted by the recession.
Okay.
You know, exhausted by it.
You would be one of the great Irish writers. Now we'll talk about Pat McCabe and you know, John B. King,
Yeah.
long gone by. You know, reading, I like to read, and reading writers from other countries, they will talk about they'll read about their civil wars and going back in generations. They'll have a plot and they'll have everything and
Yeah.
everything. Irish writers don't do that. They seem to go into their own psyche, and it can be pretty
Yeah,
dark
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah.
Is that why it hits a chord as well? Because it's inert in us, and you're able to articulate it.
Yeah. Do you remember there's a famous saying that Irish people, all their wars are merry and all their songs are sad? And I think that there is something about Irish literature that is melancholic. You know, we do dwell on sorrow.
Yeah.
And if you read John McGahern about his father and about his
Very
hard
dark.
life, and you read Angela's Ashes or whatever, you know, we do go inside
Yeah.
and we do examine the darkness. But do you know Freud, the
Yes.
psychoanalyst,
Yeah.
he refused to psychoanalyze Irish people.
I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
he said you couldn't analyze.
Seriously?
Yeah, he said you couldn't analyze Irish people. He said because they say so much, but don't say anything.
Yeah.
He said they like to talk all the time compulsively, but they don't say anything. Right?
Okay, you said in your book, in Staring at Lakes, that Irish we were in despair for a nation that was so devoted to religion, and we were in despair because of the weather. We were in
Yeah.
despair because of maybe our background from the Great Famine,
Yeah.
and also because of all that happened through his colonisation and everything through history.
Yeah, I think we were worn out by about 1989, or no, 2010. We were worn out with hardships financially and with a sense of who we are, and we felt let down by the church, and we felt, you know,
Let down
everything
by
is
the
wrong.
banks.
And then it started raining. You know, it started raining
A few years ago.
a few years, we never stopped.
Okay, Michael, so tell us about your own personal journey with the darkness and coming out of the other end.
Well, my journey started like as a teenager, and I lived 4 miles away from here at that time, and I used to cycle out to this very spot and walk over that bridge and walk around the woods and walk around the lake, and I loved it. And I didn't play football, I didn't mix very well, and I definitely, even as a young child, as a teenager, would have felt sad, kind of melancholic. And I associated that with being a writer and telling stories. And so I always dreamed of being a poet. And I remember one of the first poems I ever wrote. I'll recite it to you.
Yeah, go ahead.
And it was published in about 1969. That's a long time ago. I was about 14 or 15. And it said, "Someday I'll go to the city, and I'll look at the filth and the dirt, and I'll roll around in it, for poets are a dirty lot. And my jeans will be faded, me hair in a mess, and I'll write of death and decaying matter, and how I had an unhappy childhood." Right? And I wrote that. I was in the paper. I was about
Prophetic,
15 at the time. And I remember my father looking at me and saying, "Oh, what do you mean you had an unhappy childhood? You know, sure, we thought you were fine." And I realised that, you know, being a storyteller is firstly telling your own story, you know, and that takes courage to share, no matter who you are, no matter what you're feeling inside, to tell that story. So that's where it started
Why
for
does it
me.
take courage to
Depression
tell?
started there, but also storytelling. And I got a typewriter when I was 15, and all I wanted to be ever was a storyteller. That was my whole dream. I mean, I became a teacher, as you know, I became a priest, as you know, I became a social worker, but I dropped them all after 2 or 3 years, because all I really wanted to do was listen to stories and tell stories. And there is nobody that tells stories better than Cavan people. I mean, really and truly, I go out in town and I meet somebody in Tesco's, or I meet somebody, you know, walking down Main Street, and they know me and they'll stop me, and they'll just start, you say, how's the mother? And they'll tell you stories, or they'll share how they feel. You know, if you ask somebody, how are you feeling today, and they say, I'm great, I'm great, oh yeah, oh, everything's going well. Well, that's no good. Yeah, if somebody says, I'm not feeling great today, in fact I've had a pretty bad day, you know, that's a very powerful story. And when somebody is not feeling well, they're isolated, and if they say it out, you know, if there's people suffer from depression or anything, it doesn't matter what it is. Loneliness. And I'll tell you what really gets me now is the amount of old people who could be lonely, and you don't know.
You don't have to be old to be lonely, believe me.
I'll tell you a story about my mother. My mother, and she died 2 years ago, and I'm involved in cleaning out her house at the minute, and I've spent nearly a year and a half going through her stuff and looking at her own notes.
Tell us about that, Michael.
Oh, it's very moving, because like I got a diary that she wrote about, I think, about 20 years ago, right? So I had a child in the cot up in Leitrim in Arigna, and she was over, and I remember, and you'd be talking to her, you know, okay there, Nelly, do you want to watch the telly, and you know, the Christmas mass will be on now in a minute, you'll enjoy that and all, and you're talking away to her like that, and she's nodding at you, and she brings the Christmas pudding that she made herself and all the rest of it. And then there I am 20 years later, and I find a little diary that she was writing little notes in on those days, and she was saying how lonely she felt. And I didn't know, I mean, I knew she was lonely, but it's like one of the great regrets I have now is that I just didn't share with her, and she didn't share with me. There wasn't enough of kind of feeling and listening, you know, and saying how you feel. And that's the hard thing, I think, about, you know, going into a house when somebody's passed on, and the inclination is to throw it all in a skip. Now you were at Farnham Road, Cavan today, and you saw the skip outside the door, but that's like a year and a half afterwards, you know. Like that was a year and a half going through and looking at old notes and everything. It's very very sad, yeah, very sad. But what I did was, again, because I'm a writer, I'm a storyteller, I've tried to write the whole story of cleaning out the house and all the different things I found in it as a book. And I'm hoping that'll be published now in the next couple of months. Fantastic. Yeah. And I'm going to give it a really weird title, which I shouldn't tell you.
Oh, go on, not screaming at lakes like I
No, I was going to call it Hanging with Elephants.
Really?
Yeah.
Describe cleaning out your mother's house.
Yeah, I'll tell you why. When I was young, there used to be a poster people would have on their walls, and it was an elephant, and he was hanging off a cliff, holding on to a daisy. He had his trunk around a daisy, and he was hanging out off the cliff, right? So he's praying, and he's saying, God, please help me, right? And then there's a voice in the clouds saying, I will, just let go. Okay. I thought it was a great image of how we just always want to hold on to something. We want to hold on to Mammy. We want to hold on. Sometimes in marriages, people drive each other daft because they hold on to each other too much. You know, woman's going out the door and he says, where are you going? When will you be back? You know, it's like we always want somebody to hold on to. And in some sense, you know, faith is also holding on to somebody. It's like believing in God and having a religion that's cozy and comfortable and consoling. It's like holding on. It's like being held. Now, what's happened to us in Ireland in the past 20 years is that we, for the first time, have really experienced, first time since, we'll say, in our lifetimes, that we're not being held. You see, and that's what people would have felt in the famine. Like, if you were in the famine, and like, again, where we are, we're near Killashandra here. I remember writing a story one time years ago. It's in the book Priest, called Poorhouse, and we made a little film of it called Poorhouse. And it's the story of a little girl from Killashandra whose father gets her on an ass and cart and drives her into Cavan Town and leaves her underneath the arch in Main Street. in the
Somebody-
hope
Somebody'd feed her.
that the county home will take her in, because living outside the area she wouldn't be eligible. And he dumped her like a bag of bones, hoping that she might survive, and she was found dead then about 2 days later. And like, you couldn't, if those people prayed, they certainly wouldn't have had a sense that anybody was minding them.
No.
They certainly weren't
Despair.
getting, yeah,
Despair.
yeah. And if you think of, you know, people then
That's the
in
people are
Europe in the
feeling,
war,
yeah.
if you think of people in Auschwitz, you know, in the concentration camps, even if you think of the poor starving in Ethiopia, or people being killed in Afghanistan, you realise that, you know, it's very hard to believe in a God. It's very hard to believe all that consolation stuff, right? Now, I'm sorry for going on,
No,
but
that's gone.
here's the point. You then think about the story of Jesus, that Jesus was on the cross and he despaired. His last words were, he said to God, "You've abandoned me." He nearly died, you might say, in despair. So this sense that that nobody is holding us, that nobody loves us, that we're so alone, this is a really human experience, and it's a really deeply religious experience. And in fact, it brings you deeper into your faith. Every time you lose your faith, you find it in a deeper level.
And so what is the end of all this? You go back to your faith, or what? What saves
I
you?
don't know.
What saves
I
us?
don't know.
What's going to save us?
I don't
in the
think.
end?
I don't think we're going to be saved.
Not in this.
I don't
life.
think so.
So is that what life is all about?
Life is about other people.
Mm.
Life is about other people. And if there is no, look at it this way. Imagine if there's no God and no heaven and nobody's going to save us, right?
Okay, yeah.
Doesn't it make it all the more urgent that you'd really be nice to the next person you meet?
Mm. Yeah.
You know, I'd want to hold
Maybe
on to
that's
you.
the lesson we're learning, you know.
Hmm?
Maybe that's the lesson we're learning.
I think so. I do.
There's no
And I think
reincarnation,
that's also
nothing.
the lesson that Jesus was preaching. Like the gospel is full of things where Jesus was saying things like, don't be worrying about heaven. Like, it's now. Now is the time to love
Yeah.
your neighbour.
You do
Yeah.
like now, as is everything is now. The power
Everything
of
for
now.
me is the power now.
Yeah.
Eckhart Tolle's book is very
Yeah.
important, but also, like when I did 3 months touring the country with the book Staring at Lakes, and it was called An Evening with Michael Harding, and it was really like stand-up comedy, in the sense that I had nothing prepared. You know, I would just stand up in front of the audience and I would talk about whatever, right? And I think people love being in the present moment, you know, and there's nothing that helps you be in the present moment more than another person. You get focused on the other person. You know, I look at you, you look at me, we're aware that we're present to each other. It's a very beautiful experience. And that's what you do. That's where you find peace, I think.
Michael, we talked about the power of now and our faith, and as we all know, you are an ordained priest.
Yeah.
And you were a priest for a while, and that surely set you questioning about yourself and your religion and God. And
Yeah.
So, what's your take on it now, after so long and
My take on it
what
now,
you've gone through?
after being a Catholic priest, after spending 17 years studying Buddhism, my take on it now is I haven't a clue. And that, I think, is the answer.
Yeah.
Do you know what I
Really?
mean?
But
Yeah.
we don't have the answer.
No. And
But are we happier because you've explored it?
I think it's a question of living in the now. I think it's a question of being present in each moment of your life until your last breath, and living each moment with that knowledge that you won't be round again. There ain't no more chances. This is not a rehearsal. This is now. And what makes us human, I think, is other people. I'm not human. When I'm on my own, I get depressed. When I'm on my own, I'm thinking mad, stupid, crazy thoughts about somebody. You know the way people get annoyed with who's on the telly? They'll be giving off about Pat Kenny or Gay Byrne or something. You know, they'll be going crazy giving off about politicians. It's all like in your head. You go out and talk to your neighbour and you'll be grand.
Yeah.
So I think the answer is there is no answer. I really do. I really do.
Let's think
I
about
think
that. There
I think
is
we're
no
like
answer.
it's like, oh, who was it said one time, when leaves come, and they haven't come yet on those trees, but they will in about another 5 days. When leaves come on the trees, it's like as if something has been said. It feels like the whole cosmos is talking to you. You know, when the turn of the year comes. And so I think that we are breathing and living and belonging in this world that grows and dies.
We are
And when we
everything,
die,
yeah.
there's a great Thich Nhat Hanh, that Vietnamese monk. He does say that growing old and dying is natural. So there's nothing to be uneasy about. You don't have to even imagine that there are other lives. You don't have to console yourself with that. If you actually get into being present in the process of dying, in the process of aging, it's okay. It's like exactly natural. It's exactly what the universe wants you to do. And that's the way I feel about it. I feel that maybe the answers we give ourselves are attempts to hold on, to feel that we have our umbilical cord stuck into something and that we're safe. Now the fact is we're not safe. And the fact is we are alone. And the fact is that life sometimes can be very savage if you look at wars and poverty and injustice. But in all that loneliness and all that isolation, we have this chance to share it with other people. You know, to talk to your neighbour. And that's
it,
all
to
there
share
is.
with other
Yeah.
people and to respect other people
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'd say to have, like, I do believe an awful lot in the sense of having a sense of humour. You know, that,
Yeah.
like I
Like your
sometimes,
dishwasher.
yeah, but I sometimes don't say anything serious at all.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, because if you can laugh, if you can see how funny it is to be human, how ridiculous, you know, we evolved as a species that doesn't work. Like our heads got too big, and they evolved, which is why women have problems in childbirth, because our heads should be smaller to get through. You know, it's sad. We need 20 years to rear, you know, to rear an animal like that. Other animals can rear them quickly. We're not sustainable as a species. Now we're interfering with the whole cosmos and the
Yeah.
ecology of the oceans.
Do you not think that's because we do think too much?
Yeah,
We do think
we
too
do.
much,
We,
don't
we're a sad
Our
old
heads always
crowd.
going round spinning and winning.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to get to one bit in the book where you were in a film, and I forget the name of it now. Was it Run and Alive or
Run and jump.
Run and Jump?
Yeah.
And you were in the coffin for 3 hours. You
Yeah.
poor old thing, yeah.
Yeah. 6
And your head was spinning in that, and you're after a bout of depression, but your head was spinning in that coffin, and you were totally still.
Yeah.
And you got to hang on everything in that time.
I just felt when I was, you know, in this particular film, and as I say, I had a few scenes where I was at the dinner table, this, that, and the other, and then eventually I was the old man and I died. So I had to do this scene where they were all coming in and weeping and crying, and I had to lie in the coffin. And I learned a number of things about coffins. One was that there's no room for elbows, you know,
But you wouldn't be using.
and
them
you wouldn't
anyway.
use it when you're dead, so it wouldn't matter. And the other thing about them was there's no cushion for your backside. So it was very uncomfortable just lying there on the boulders like this in the coffin for about 3 hours. And them all coming in, be looking at you like, oh, he's dead. So I started thinking about, well, this is like a rehearsal because we'd all end up in coffins, you know. And I was definitely at that time physically ill. I'd come out of hospital and I was depressed. And I didn't want to be in coffins. I didn't want to be
want a
thinking,
rehearsal for that.
no.
No. But it was, you kind of put it in a funny aspect, and also the sad aspect of it as well.
Yeah.
It made you think differently afterwards.
Yeah.
right?
Wouldn't like to do it every day now, getting into a coffin.
Okay, well, how about a bit of fun now? Tell us some of the funny things of life, Michael. You like a bit of fun as well, because we're after going through pretty dark stuff, so a bit of fun. Tell me about maybe your music and
Well, one of
could
the
you learn to
ways,
play the banjo?
one of the ways that I used to always find consolation was playing the tin whistle. When I was a young fella in Cavan, we had a great teacher in the De La Salle School in Cavan, Brother Timothy, and there was a tin whistle band, and that started all the young fellas on tin whistles, and I stayed playing the tin whistle. And when I would be down or lonely or fed up, very often I'd play the tin whistle. And then eventually I got a flute, about 20 years ago, a big black wooden flute, and I learned how to play that. And I was living up in Erigna, where the famous Packy Degnan, the flute player, used to live, and John McKenna, the great flute player who went to America 100 years ago, he used to live there. So I thought maybe I'll get a flute, and I started playing a few tunes. And sometimes then Steve Wickham, the musician, he's a great friend of mine for many years, who plays with the Water
You
Boys,
hang out in good
and he'd
circles,
come
I'll
over
tell
to
you.
me, and in the morning sometimes, and he'd have the fiddle with him, and we'd play a few tunes, and we'd be sitting there up in Erigna looking out at Loch Allen, and we'd be playing away.
Yeah.
And sometimes then I'd just stop playing and listen to him, because he was very good, and I'm no good. But music is a great therapy. I'm a great fan of that man in Cavan with the big beard. What's his name?
Martin Donoghue.
Martin Donoghue.
Well, yeah,
yeah.
Martin.
And the Fla in Cavan. It was a great event.
It was great, fantastic.
Yeah.
It
And
brought us-
I was
yeah.
there. I was there with the Dannon. I did a bit of a one-man show with the Dannon
Right.
and Eleanor Shanley
missed that, yeah.
summer. Yeah. And I was really proud to be working with them and to be in Cavan.
Michael, you talk about the power of now, living in the now.
Yeah.
But what is the future for Michael Harding?
Well, the future, I suppose, in work terms, will be another book. I have this memoir that I'm finished about my mother. It'll come out hopefully in 2014. 2015, for about 3 months, I'll be touring the country reading it. And then I would really hope to finish a play that I started about 5 or 6 years ago about old people in Kinnegad. And I recorded loads of stories from people in Kinnegad, and a particular story of a fellow who left Ireland as a young fella and he went to Canada. And in Edmonton in Canada, he went up north and he was working on the oil rigs, and he met an Eskimo woman, an Inuit woman, and he fell in love with her and he married her. And he said, come home to Ireland, and she wouldn't come home to Ireland, but she said she'd go as far as Newfoundland because she had relations in Newfoundland. And he was 40 years in Newfoundland, and then she died of cancer. And then he was on his own, and he was very lonely. He was very lonely because he couldn't come home to Ireland, and he was there in Newfoundland. And I got his story. I heard his story, I recorded it, and I would love to make a play about that. And that, I hope, is the kind of next thing I'll do in the future when I'm finished these memoirs. What I'll do with myself, like I think spiritually in the future, is I would really try, because I do worry. I'm 60, so you start worrying about the shortness of life and how your health is holding up. And I think that in old age you try and develop some sort of wisdom. So I'd love to have more time to spend at lakes and walking around Cavan, and maybe somewhere in Cavan doing again a kind of a book about Cavan, or about like all the stories that are connected with music. I'd love to get a book going where you'd connect, like, say, every parish in the county, and you'd be able to have, say, 5 or 10 tunes from Kilnilek or from Swanlinbar or wherever, and then you'd have 5 or 10 stories from local people, and it'd all be on one big huge archive, and you'd be able to go into, say, the library, and you'd have a screen with the county and a map, and you'd be able to click a button for, let's say, you know, Milltown or Belturbet or Kilcogie, and up would come files of music or files of storytelling. I would love to see that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, as a big archive.
Will
So
you
maybe that's what I'll do
Right.
in my old age.
So, Michael, thank you so much for talking about life and love and the universe and the power of now.